I'm watching you two guys.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, yeah, we'll wait for the sign.
Getting ready to get started here. I want to thank everybody for coming to this panel on the future of AI. I have a very prestigious panels here. We're going to start off with Lieutenant General Stephen Quast. He's commander of the Air Education and Training Command, based out of the Joint Base in San Antonio. So I'm going to hand it over to Stephen to make some remarks, and then we'll go through the other panelists, do some Q&A, and then open up to the floor.
You sure you don't want to introduce everybody and then we'll go down?
Oh,
It feels a little weird to talk without everybody being introduced because she's the main
And
man.
she might interject too, right? All right, so let's do it. So in the center there, you've got Wendy Anderson, who's the General Manager of Defense and National Security for Spark Cognition here locally in Austin, Texas. And at the end, we have General Matt Easley, who's my notes problem. Who's part of the director for the Army Artificial Intelligence in the National Capital Region within the Army Futures Command. So again, we'll start off with General Quast, and then.
And that was my fault. You know, you had your papers all set for the protocol, but this is how I want
this is impromptu.
This is what I want the conversation to be. I want it to be an organic conversation that's authentic and it's about what you're interested in. So I'm going to keep my comments very short, and we can really get to what you're interested in. But as a student of history, I have never seen a time where the change in technologies, AI being one of the major players, has been so dramatic and so consequential to everything we care about. And one thing to just remind you of is that when we're in uniform here, I know that the movies and the narrative of America is that, you know, the military is all about going out and fighting. But I want to remind you of the fact that our job is to be peacemakers. Our job is to be so strategic and build such potential national security capability that nobody on planet Earth would ever even mess with our values. And our values are the fact that we respect every human being, no matter who they are, what they believe in, or what they eat or wear, as long as they respect other human beings as well. And so uplifting the human condition is the purpose for our gathering. How artificial intelligence can help uplift the human condition in all of its forms for every society on planet Earth, and how we build security so people do not use violence as they try to work out their differences between civilizations. That is the goal, and that's what I want to talk about today. The power of artificial intelligence to uplift the human condition and create more security where all people can live free with their independence, their civil liberties, and their privacy intact in the 21st century digital age.
I can't think of a more inspiring way to have started the panel. Afternoon, my name is Wendy Anderson. General Quast, I appreciate that. General Easley, it's a pleasure really to be with both of you and to join the SAIC team as well. You guys, before starting out, I just want to say thanks so much for being here. I mean, you got a lot of other things that you can be doing right now. It is very, very cool to see so many folks interested in the defense innovation and the defense tech space. And I, for one, just am enormously grateful that you're taking time out of your day to come spend it with us, listening to us try to share some interesting experiences and anecdotes that we have about why this is so important. I really want to start off with one pretty big picture statement, and actually it dovetails very nicely with what General Quast just said. You know, over the long arm of history, there really have only been a few fundamental changes in the way that we wage war. The introduction of or employment of cavalry, the advent of the rifled musket, the combination of fast armor with air support and instant radio communications and execution of the Blitzkrieg strategy in World War II. Tech developments, as we all know, especially those of us who are here in Austin and have the opportunity to be a piece of this vibrant and potent tech and a subset of that defense tech ecosystem, really get that these tech developments come from a variety of fields, and they produce seismic shifts. And I was thinking about that word seismic the other day. I love etymological roots of words because I think it tells you a lot about the original meaning of the word. The root of seismic in Greek is shock, right? So sort of a shock to the system, a shock to a historical moment, and ushering in of a new generation. I think we are right now on the cusp of another. And it is with not the introduction of AI technologies. AI in different forms has been around for many, many decades. But it is a recognition of the role of advanced tech and what our role, meaning the United States defense space, the United States as a country, will be in this. Yesterday I had the opportunity to lead a panel talking about, essentially what is the role of AI in defense. There was a China expert there for very obvious reasons. We'll chat more about that. There was somebody there representing Europe and NATO in that conversation. And there was somebody there from the Defense Department Strategic Capabilities Office who does a lot of the research and development in the department surrounding this. And I will just say there is, as General Quast said, no more important set of technological issues for us to grapple with right now, in my view, than this. If you care about the United States retaining technological superiority, which converts in one way into military edge, not to go out and find wars to fight, but as General Quast said, to broaden the array of possibilities of making society better, more optimal, more functional, less costly. Lots on the commercial side and the economic side that we could talk about. But I just want to be really blunt with you guys about the reason why I am here. I had many years in the defense space. I worked for Secretary Ash Carter as his chief of staff for 4 years. I know he came and hung out here the other day, heard it went really well. And I got to tell you, what I really learned from that, and then I'll pass it to General Weasley, is that fundamental set of commitments to the national security of the United States. It doesn't mean that we don't support other things. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have engaged dynamic conversations about ethics and about the moral side of all of this. But I'm in it so that the United States can win the technology argument, so that we don't have to worry about the security and safety of our citizens here or where we are abroad. It is not to start wars. I am also not a pacifist. I am also not someone who wants to go out and find conflict. It's a deterrent. It's something that obviously adds to our economy, and it allows us more than anything else to retain a military edge in an increasingly global environment where many of our near peer or even competitors now, like China, are investing 10 times as much as the United States in the development of AI technologies across the board. Lots more to say there, but I want to be really honest with you about where I come from a commitment and values perspective. And am so appreciative of the different innovation groups, Army Futures, AFWorks, DIU, all of these amazing organizations here, actually situated here in the Innovation Center, and thrilled to be a small part of the importance of this conversation today. So appreciate you guys very much.
Wendy, thank you. I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank South by for inviting all of us here. Capital Works and Army Futures Command for supporting all this amazing effort that needs to go on here. I want to just kind of, before I introduce myself and the charter of my organization, I want to talk a little bit more about what Wendy just spoke about and the transformation that we're going through. There's a series that you probably all well know, series of military revolutions in military affairs going on right now, from hypersonic hyper precision, hypersonic weapons, manned-unmanned teaming, information warfare or information operations. But the glue behind all those will be artificial intelligence. It's going to allow us to connect those systems to make them effective. And it's not just us using it, it's our peers, it's third countries, it's everyone using from ISIS to the major nation states are using a combination of these technologies to wage war differently. And we have to start thinking hard about that, and especially we need innovators like you all in this room to help us figure out the new technologies and the new ways of employing that tech to make us more efficient, more effective, or even just cheaper than what we're doing right now. And I think it's that combination of that's going to allow us to, again, as you said, sir, keep our strategic capabilities so high that no one's going to want to ever fight us. So let me talk a little bit about my organization. So the Army AI Task Force was set up early this fall with a charter of how to bring artificial intelligence across the Army. And that's a broad picture, because we need AI in almost every business system you can think of, from our medical systems, to our legal systems, to our audit readiness, to our warfighting systems. But they picked us to be under Army Futures Command to figure out how to transform the future force modernization effort using both AI and other technologies to create the future force for our Army. The reason they picked Austin, Texas to head Army Futures Command, we haven't seen we're down, our headquarters is actually a couple blocks down here with the UT State Building, just down on 7th Street. And the reason we're here is so we can reach out and meet people just like you in a lot of different forums and to be able to bring that technology quickly and differently into the defense establishment. So we are trying to do things differently. For my 4 lines of effort for my organization align really closely with the lines of effort of the Joint AI Center. So the Joint AI Center was set up last summer under the DoD CIO to establish policies for the Department of Defense. And we're trying to establish those same type of policies across the Army. How do we speed our risk management process where we can take new software, new technologies, and get them integrated into our warfighting systems much faster? How do we do that software development cycle at speeds that we're just not used to doing within the Department of Defense? How do we upgrade our infrastructure and keep it updated much more quickly? Because right now, as we roll things out, that process is not quite designed for the age of AI. It's designed, as you can well imagine, from a 20th century system. And we have to figure out how do we keep that, have the policies allow us to update that and keep the infrastructure safe to do that. We're also trying to do early wins. So we're looking for great ideas, good technologies that we can demonstrate how to do AI and how to do it at scale. And then to take lessons learned from those different activities to help other groups around the Army or the rest of the Department of Defense to take those and again move them quickly to enterprise. And then finally, we need to update the way we think about our culture, at least from the standpoint of artificial intelligence. How do we make more people in all our military occupation specialties know how to do AI without having to get people with PhDs in AI to do it? So, looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, so I have to also remind you all, the reality here is that we were in the lobby, she needed a security detail, so the two of us, she just grabbed us. We're here just to keep Wendy safe, just so you know, okay? She gave us these talking points to talk about. But let me kind of dovetail off what you just said, because what I do in my role in the Air Force is applying AI to learning. Because one of the philosophical realities is that the group of people that learn faster are going to win, okay? And if you can apply AI to the learning environment and empower every human being to learn at the speed of their capability, that is the offset that will last forever. And so I didn't wait around for the Air Force or the bureaucracy to tell us, get going. We just started. And we started right here in Austin, and probably for the same reason. You know, he was talking about all the reasons he's here in Austin. The real reason is because Austin's weird. And weird is innovative, because you get people of different views coming together, not afraid to share and to listen, to learn, to change their minds. So we started our system right here in Austin, Texas. And here's what they've done in the last year. They have transformed the way we have given tools to our individual airmen to learn, where the airmen can now look at their own strengths and weaknesses, and they can use artificial intelligence to help coach them in ways that are managed by master practitioners in the craft. If you had to have a name for it, you would call it Learning Next, where you use the tools of the age, whether it's artificial intelligence coupled with supercomputing, artificial or augmented reality, virtual reality, and you put it into an environment where you give the human being total control. And here are the paradigms we broke, and you'll get a chuckle out of this because it's true. In the industrial age, when you came into the service of any of our services, we will tell you exactly what to learn, we'll tell you when to learn it, we'll tell you how to learn it. And if we haven't told you to learn it, you will not learn it, or you will be breaking the law. And we flipped that and basically said, you can learn anything you want, anytime you want, in any way you want. And we're going to give you the technology and the tools to have an artificial intelligence coach that will guide you along the way, with a human coach that helps optimize those things that AI still is not very good at doing, some of the creative and the envisionment and so on and so forth. And so here's what we've done. We have taken the second paradigm where everything has to take a certain amount of time. Since the beginning of the aircraft, it took a year to teach somebody to fly. Why does it take a year? Well, because it takes a year. That's the military way. If I tell you it takes a year, it's going to take a year. Even if you're Chuck Yeager, it's going to take a year. That's right. And what we found out is normally what takes a year and $3 million, we were able to do in half the time and less than half the cost. Okay? And they were better. They were better human beings at that task. This happened to be flying that we did. But I have 127 tasks in the Air Force, whether you're security forces, or you're an engineer, or you're a firefighter. And I'm exploring all of them on how artificial intelligence helps you learn faster. So when we get into the question and answers, we can talk about the practical nature of that. How do you do that in a large organization where everybody else is saying, wait a minute, you can't be doing something different. That's not good. Is that going to threaten me? So we can talk about the principles that keep you ethical and moral and legal, but also effective at applying artificial intelligence to anything you're doing. And in my case, it's the learning environment that transcends the human spirit. And as long as you can figure out the bureaucracy and how to deal with it, there is no limit to what you can do.
So General, let me ask you a question off of that. So we're sitting at Capital Factory, one of the larger startup ecosystems, and one of the things that's kind of part of startup culture is this notion of fail fast. So one of the things I'd like to ask you about related to the learning environment is there a risk on potential over-reliance on AI to where you are building a learning environment that's more repetitively based on success in that learning environment versus failure, and how do you prepare for those things you haven't seen from failure?
Yeah, that's a great point. And this gets back to the fact that a lot of the conversation we're going to have today is about human nature. Because every group of people that get together behave in a way that's consistent with human nature. If there's a lot of people, there needs to be some process. It's kind of rules to the road. We drive on the right side, so everybody drives on the right side and nobody gets hurt. So rules are not a bad thing, and we have to manifest them. So this question of risk is really important. How do you take risk? And here's what I found, and this is a principle that's not just for me. Every great innovator in any organization, whether it's 2 people or 2,000 people or 2 million people, have to behave the same way in this one principle of risk. And that is that when you have a bureaucracy or a group of people that has done something a certain way, they want to keep doing it that way. That's what you've designed. You've told them, do this job and do it this way. This works. This is successful. That's called doctrine in the military. You do it this way and you will win the marketplace. You will feed your family at night. And so anything that disrupts that is considered dangerous. Wait a minute, don't move my cheese, And so innovation and taking risk moves the cheese of the bureaucracy that's held accountable for building something. So here's what has to happen. The leader of the organization, and in this case it's me, I have to straddle the innovative, disruptive, divergent thinking and creativity with the bureaucracy that's making the donuts. And if I don't do it, the bureaucracy will kill the people trying to innovate and be creative. It's just human nature, and it's not that they're bad people. And I hate this term frozen middle because it's just not true. They are the people you have told, here are the rules, make the donuts. And if you make them this way, people will like them and will make money. And then the divergent people that say, I want to make a square donut. No, I want to make a donut out of water. No, I want to, they go on these crazy pathways of creativity. That's where the risk is, okay? So for the leader to allow them to take risk with boundaries so they don't hurt themselves or others, and be divergent, and hide them away from the bureaucracy. Don't let the bureaucracy see what they're doing, okay? Because they will be threatened. And then when you see something that works, then you bring it in. But this requires three things for that group of people that's doing this risk stuff. One, they have to have relationships with companies out there in America, in the world. And they have to be relationships of trust, where that company trusts that the money will be there, the relationship will be there, and and that is going to be a business that will eventually make them money in this system we have, where you have to grow the economy as a way of going forward. And the second is this ethics, where we are doing things to uplift the human condition and make our job easier, better, faster, and smarter than the competition, which is just business 101. And then the third is that you manage the risk real time so that you aren't going to hurt anybody. So those three things, but if you don't have the boss that is straddling the innovation and divergence with the convergence and the bureaucracy, it will never work and you'll make no progress.
I'd like to actually follow up on that. It's like we choreographed our comments.
I've been reading your text, Jim.
So a couple of really interesting points. As someone who really sees herself as a defense professional, because really that's what I've been for 20 years, but who also now is leading a defense business of a leading artificial intelligence company that's based here in Austin. We've got folks all over the world. A couple of points, and bear with me. I'm gonna give some anecdotes, just because I think the points are often more tangibly understood. And it's freaking me out. I keep seeing my old boss, Ash Carter, on all these videos, so I'm like staring over me. I'm wondering if I'm going to say the right things about defense innovation. But I'm going to start actually with a couple of anecdotes, two in particular that involve him, because so much of my training, which really was just exceptional, kind of under his leadership, and as you all know, he is truly a defense innovator. I mean, he was the architect of the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental. He has been the momentum, along with a lot of other great people across the services and so forth. He's been and was that leader. In fact, still is now from the outside, of making sure that the potency of these agencies to introduce commercial innovation at speed and scale doesn't stop with his absence, right? So two quick stories. One is that when I first joined the Obama administration in 2010, I'll never forget, Bob Gates was Secretary of Defense. And I will never forget when Secretary Gates came down to Secretary Carter's office, and at that point he was the lowly number 3 in the department, right? He was the, Carter that is, the Undersecretary of Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. And he, of course, most of this room would understand kind of what that meant. A lot of people outside the defense world didn't necessarily get it, but it is every single major procurement of every single weapon system across the services of the United States military. It's all R&D, it's all science and technology, and it's all the logistics of anyone in the defense space. So really it was a lot of Iraq and Afghanistan, right, at that time? So Secretary Gates came down, it was like my second day. So of course I was completely freaked out that the defense secretary was sitting there, and I was sitting up against the wall with my notes and trying to look like I knew what I was doing, which I didn't. And so Gates said to Secretary Carter, hey Ash, the country's at war, the building, meaning the Pentagon, is not, especially your part, and you own $420 billion of the defense budget. This was in 2010 when the defense budget was north of $600 billion. So all that goods and services, that stuff, that's what Secretary Carter owned, okay? So he said, you gotta get with it. And over to you, bud, because I got a lot of things going on in the world. So Secretary Carter did a really interesting thing at that time, and I wish this were talked about more because I think it's an exemplary moment of leadership, and it also shows where the difficulties and the challenges of the bureaucracy still remain. He developed a number of task forces, which probably sounds really boring to you guys, you know, but it's like he basically would sit around and say, how do we get around ourselves? We've developed all of these really pretty complicated, amazing things because the building is risk averse and we have certain processes and certain sort of established rules and regulations we have to follow. They work. But how do we now get around ourselves? How do we innovate around ourselves almost before anybody knows we're doing it? Because at some point that'll become another part of the bureaucracy, right? So he developed something called the Improvised Explosive Device Task Force. I don't know if many of you know this or not. Certainly military folks in the room will. 2009 and 2010 had the highest number of American service member deaths as a result of IEDs in Afghanistan and in Iraq. So that's one of the ways that he tried to deal with that. The ISR task force, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, right, where we're getting information from drones or from, from out in the field where folks are deployed to try to figure out what's the situational awareness of a particular location. So he established that. He established something called the MRAP task force. That's a particular land vehicle that worked better, obviously, in Afghanistan because the terrain is different than in Iraq. And it's like, how do we speed all of these different technologies to our men and women in the field who literally are truly tip of the spear, and I don't just mean special ops folks, I mean our infantry as well. How do we rapidly procure, develop, and deploy those sets of technologies so that we do two things? Number one, and most importantly, have our men and women come home alive. And number two, so existential, right? And number two, so that we continue to advance whatever defense objectives the President and the Secretary have laid out. That sounds a little bit more theoretical, but I'll just leave it to you guys. I think you know what I'm talking about. So Carter did that. And I don't want to say we were hyper successful, but he figured out how to leverage the Pentagon, the frozen middle, which I don't like either, although that's a difficult thing to try to overcome, especially now that I'm on the outside in industry, to get folks to take chances and to experiment. It's a hard thing to figure out, but he figured out a way to do that and to get those technologies out in the field that allowed us to help. But that was Iraq and Afghanistan, right? So I had this conversation recently with someone who's very involved with the artificial intelligence agencies and operations now in the department. He said, Wendy, that's an amazing anecdote. I am so glad you told me that. What is different with artificial intelligence and other advanced tech is that it's not existential. So you don't have the same speed. You don't have the same, you might have the same intent, you might have the same motivation, you might have the same desire on the part of our amazing military professionals, and these guys are knocking it out of the park. I mean, you could list to me all the ways in which you feel like you're not doing what you need to be doing every day, but you're doing a lot leadership-wise to try to, advance this within the department, and it is so freaking hard. It is so hard from the inside as someone who knows to do it. So the reason why I wanted to bring that up is just to say, I've had a number of people say to me, if you don't have that existential thing, like you did when Secretary Gates went to Secretary Carter, that might shift a little bit the speed, the willingness, the mobilization of the building. I would love to know what these two think about that, but I think that could be at play here. And let me just mention one more anecdote, because I think this is also very germane to the conversation. On one of my trips out of Afghanistan with Secretary Carter, I will never forget, and he's a technologist, he's a scientist by training, right? One of the things I'll never forget him saying to me, it was one of those stark moments where suddenly you hear someone say something, you're like, that was actually really important, and I'm not even getting the full dimensions of what you just said right now. I'll continue to think about it. He said, Wendy, for basically, this was 2009-ish maybe or so, and he said, we were 8-9 years into the wars. He said, for all these years, and who knows how many more, we have essentially spent time intellectually, public treasure, national treasure and money, and human resources-wise on the civilian and the military side in the Department of Defense on 2 places. So now it's 2019, and it's 17 to 18 years later. 2 places, for the most part, have dominated the national conversation. And as a result, our priorities as a country and as a defense leadership community, 2 places. And he said, I wonder what we've missed. I wonder what we've missed. And you guys, I gotta be really honest with you. I think this conversation today is one of them. Which is not to say that there are amazingly talented people who are working on all of these technologies indigenously within the department. But if you'll note, one thing that's fascinating, where is innovation and technological advancement, especially around AI, happening? In the private sector almost exclusively. And 30, 40 years ago, you had a lot of American monies going into national labs, amazing agencies like DARPA, and we still do, okay? But if you look at the cost differential, and you look at the money that is being put in by our own private sector, of which I am now a part, $18 to $21 billion in the last 5-6 years, that is an unbelievable number compared with what our government has put into the defense R&D and S&T space. So again, when he says, what have we missed? I think part of it is this conversation. There is a lot happening from the defense side, and I do not want to give short shrift to that. I have been in it. I was with Secretary Carter when he was trying to figure out how the hell we set up something that gets commercial technologies into the defense space. I really do get it. I know how hard it is. At the same time, it's not fast enough. And I think what's so awesome about having these 2 up here is to hear them narrate what are we doing to try to reduce speed, the timelines and the time lags, because we're not in this in a bubble. We have competitors and near peer competitors truly upon us. And I'm not trying to sound alarmist and weird, but if we want to win, we got to figure this out. We got to figure it out on a much faster timeline than the department is now engaged in. And again, all due respect to my colleagues, we're all in this together. We can't do this without each other. So it's not even a criticism like that. It's just an honest point of feedback about what it is to be one of these companies on the outside now trying to figure out how to partner. And it is tough from both sides. And we all get up every day and we try to figure out how to slog through it. Fortunately, we've got these 2, in their services trying to figure that out, but it is tough. It is tough. So I'll leave my comments there and ask one of my colleagues to jump in.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, like, the IED, counter-IED story is actually a really interesting one to kind of think about, then how that applies to the AI task force. And, like, I think the IED story was interesting because it worked as a joint task force. So do you have a vision as to how you look at the AI task force and how that grows into more of a joint operation across the commands?
Sure, so the Army, as I said earlier, the Army AI Task Force falls under Army Futures Command and trying to help move the Army into its future force modernization enterprise. But we also work closely with the Joint AI Center, and they have, again, at the joint level, trying to come up with those policies, that infrastructure, those capabilities, of how do we do this at scale across not just hundreds, but probably 1,000 different business processes that we have in the Department of Defense that all need AI. But one of the key things that's causing us to go a little bit more slowly than I think a lot of us would like has to do with data. And as you probably all know, data is the key piece that we need to do AI to train these systems. I've been told, Jolie, you need to go out to the National Training Center, look at all the great data they're collecting there. And they are collecting a lot of great data there. A lot of the data that they're collecting on the way we fight forces there just isn't quite at the level, it isn't quite at the maturity, it isn't quite at the fidelity that we need to train artificial intelligence agents. So a lot of our work is got to figure out how do we go from where we're at today, how do we clean up either the data that we have, or how do we use synthetic training environments to create new data that's going to allow us to train our soldiers, our airmen, our sailors, and our Marines. We've got to go further than that. Just like you said, sir, it's important that the training environment that we're using to train our soldiers or airmen is high fidelity and it gives them that return on investment so they get a better training environment. We also have to think a little bit more further in the future. How can we use that same training environment to not just train our humans? How can we use that same training environment to train our intelligent agents? And to leverage both so we can kind of go back and forth. So, okay, we need a human removed from this case. Other times, the speeds are so fast that we just can't have that human in the loop anymore. But it's key that we be thinking about that now as we create that data taxonomy, as we create the architecture to do that, to be able to go back and forth where we have a more autonomous system or a less autonomous system, again, depending upon the situation.
So let me ask a question for you guys. This is going to be a little different. So we've been having a good discussion, more technology oriented around AI and the role of AI, the role of our government agencies in fostering that technology. One of the things I think about is, 20 years ago, if you look at Silicon Valley and how we think about the semiconductor world and that industry, when we think about what happened in the subsequent 20 years, there was technology, but there was a fundamental shift in how we basically lost some of the capabilities related to supply chain and manufacturing and all the other external components around the mindset that became important for fostering that segment, right? And how do we think about where the future in 20 years goes from an AI perspective as to what do we need to build from the tooling perspective around our education or supply chain essentially for AI and our ability to kind of grow what this ecosystem looks like. There's new business models, there's new technology models, there's new service models to get to that, human-centered vision that you have for the future, and how does that need to be fostered and changed to kind of completely shift the way that our defense culture actually thinks about it.
Yeah, and we'll keep this one short because I do want to get to the questions that are in the audience. But this one is, for me, framing this is such a rich opportunity for business. And the key for me is the principle of not over-controlling this journey. Do not do what the military does and centralize control and create a program that everybody has to follow. This is a rich field that is fertile for every company out there to give to our national, at least for us, the national security infrastructure, things we have been starving for 15 years, okay? So for a clever entrepreneur, this is as good as it gets, okay? And we need your help because we will never fall into the arrogant trap of predicting the future. But we will partner with you and see where your geniuses can take us. The creative spirit of America is so powerful. This open system of respect. And as long as we do it ethically and morally, the sky is the limit.
I would just add, again, I'm very inspired. Thank you for saying this. I'm suddenly ready to go ahead
She
and
said
work
it.
and do something. I should leave and go get to, I did want to say something about, though, Chitra, your comment too, that about sort of forecasting supply chain and logistics, and this is sort of banal. Maybe this is my uninteresting statement, please don't fall asleep. But a lot of the conversation about AI, what we've learned in industry, or as part of a smaller company that has a big commercial business and also now has a defense business, which I lead, is trying to figure out how do we keep our business rationalized, right? How do I talk to investors who have no exposure to government and really very little exposure to defense? And I'm living that dream every single day of my life. I am not kidding. I mean, I am in this, our CEO is in this. I mean, folks care a lot about what we're doing, but the business case is increasingly not there for defense. Now, we're not going to make any decision to pull out. We're going to keep doing this, but that's what I mean about the hard part, is that we're rationalizing and trying to figure out every day, because we're mismatched timelines, how to stay engaged. And we've got amazing advocates across government who, again, and the service is doing amazing things, but I would say this. The AI conversation is so freaky for a lot of people too in the military. For a lot of folks it's not, but for a lot of folks it is. And one of the ways that we as an industry partner have tried now to talk about it is just say, hey, we kind of know what your pain points are. We know where you're losing money. We know where you're losing time. Here are some of the solutions we have in software. And let's tell you a little bit about what the cost-benefit analysis would be to you. So there's the sexy, freaky Terminator, artificial general intelligence, sci-fi sort of side of the spectrum, right? Which is actually really interesting, let's be honest. We're not there, okay? And then there's the banal, unsexy, almost snore-bore, hyper-important predictive maintenance, prescriptive maintenance applications on any naval asset, land asset, air asset, etc. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is just say, hey, let's just take it down, let's all get real. We all have cost issues we're trying to deal with. We all have efficiency issues we're trying to deal with, and in the military context, we have readiness issues that we have to make sure is number one priority, which these two know far better than I do. So one of the things that we're trying to do better, as we've learned in the last year and a half, because you guys are not the only ones learning, we're learning too, right, is to figure out how to enter into that kind of conversation. Hey, here's what we do and here's what we do really well. We've done some research into where you guys, I think, are struggling. If we're wrong, tell us. I did have a very interesting conversation with a 4-star I will not name in Washington, who's an amazing leader. And I will never forget having a conversation with him. And he looked across the table and he said, we're talking about drone swarms, we're talking about all of this other stuff that you guys are actually engaged with, just in a lab perspective down in Austin. But can I just ask a question? I was like, sure. And he said, can we just, do people know what to ask for? Like, does anybody that you've really talked to, do people know what to ask for with AI technology? Do they even know? And I said, I just love it that you asked that. You're so honest. And for the most part, what I've found is no, they don't. How would they? Right? How would they? So again, trying to, just a lesson learned, and I think it's a really important piece for sort of industry folks who are looking to partner, and if you are, please come find me, and let me just, give you my email, and let's have conversations about it, because there's lots and lots and lots of stuff here to be learned. There's no roadmap for how to do this as an industry person with government. It doesn't exist. Former Deputy Secretary of Defense Bob Work recently said to me and others who were trying to kind of work through some frustrations, hey guys, this is amazing. Like, you're in it. You're one of the leading companies, and there's a bunch of other ones out there, and you've got this ecosystem, and you've got willing, department customers, but there is no roadmap that you can cut and paste from what somebody else has done, right? So you're figuring it out, share it, figure out a way to make it work. But I want to talk about some of those more banal aspects, which is really where some of the most massive benefits to not only predictive and prescriptive maintenance, but to supply chain and to logistics and that long tail that often sucks up so much money for readiness.
Thanks, Wendy. A lot you just covered. From my standpoint, we're never going to have, everyone thinks the DoD budgets are these huge budgets. And in some ways they are, but you have to remember how many programs they're divided over. So in the last talk, someone got up, so there's venture capitalists on the panel, and she said they're going in investments now, are not at the hundreds of millions of dollars level, it's now at $1 billion. They want to go in, pick a kingmaker straight off, and invest $1 billion so they can get get the head of the market for all these systems. With DoD, I just can't see that happening. And the poor captain came up talking about an SBR where they're investing $50,000. No, exactly, and people were laughing at him. But one thing we have to figure out a better way of doing is not creating these stovepipes where we have Defense Department systems over here and we have civilian systems over here, because we're not going to be able to leverage those the economies of scales that they get in Silicon Valley when they amortize the cost of something over 1 billion customers. We just don't have that many customers in the Army. The question is, Wendy,
sure.
is how do we get my smartphone here?
I'll give her mine.
I need something to look at.
Do solve readiness. How is this going to tell me that I need to go get my teeth cleaned? How is it going to tell me that I haven't exercised in the last couple of days and I need to go run? But I haven't been to the rifle range in the last 6 months and I need to go do some type of piece. And all those should be easy problems. Right now they're not. All these systems are all stovepiped across the Department of Defense. So we've got to find ways to make this much work, because all our soldiers have this. So
what I'm I think we have about 15 minutes left, so what I'll do is I'll just invite anyone from the audience who wants to ask a question, if you can just line up, and then we'll just, take them as they come. That's not a microphone.
It's not a microphone.
But you can just stand there.
It's not a microphone.
I can hear you.
It's running my phone.
Human intelligence helps. Appreciate all the comments. Thank you so very much. We understand the economics and the situation that we have. We appreciate everybody on the panel. So much is going on also in the civilian sector. And I'm just very curious about the creating leverage with, for example, what's going on at HHS with Jose and that vehicle, and how are you thinking about engaging industry with proof of concept, for example, and just to generate the enthusiasm. I know that there's announcements coming out from CMS to bend severe cost curves in treatments and episodes of care based on artificial intelligence. It's those kind of drivers that make immediate sense, but I got to tell you, from industry's perspective and coming out of NIH, the emphasis, it's very difficult working with Silicon Valley when you say, gosh, you know, we have a $50,000 problem,
Yes.
and they won't engage for under 7 figures. It's just not there. So how are we going to do that? And can you create leverage with HHS and some of the civilian vehicles that are being generated, the enthusiasm over there?
Yeah, so I'll take a first swipe at that and then pass it off. But this comes down to the fact that the DoD is not fit for the journey that civil society is on with regard to the speed and the agility of how you put money on contract and actually build things out. The good news, though, is that this is recognized in all of the services and in Congress. Congress has, in fact, given us a lot of authorities that we didn't have before, from some of the other transactional authorities to experimentation authorities. But ultimately, it comes down to culture and process. I would tell you that even if you followed all the 5,000 series regs and all the FARs, you could actually move as fast as we need to move. Much of it is our own cultural predisposition to risk aversion. And so we are on a cultural journey to not be so afraid to take risk and to partner. But we also have some process issues where the color of money, as Congress has their rightful oversight, the color of money is such that we need mechanisms to sweep them together. I will tell you that if you talk to the people at AFWorks and DIU, they have already figured that out. And it can be big money. And as the DoD is learning to change, to be relevant, to plug in to civil society, we can make progress. But you need leaders that are willing to take the risk of doing something different. It's like we've been a caged animal for the last 20 years. Congress has opened up the cage and we're afraid to go out because it's dangerous out there. So that cultural willingness to take risk is really important. It has to be the leadership, because even if somebody in the organization wants to, their boss will fire them if they take risk, even at our level.
The follow-up question though, is how do you measure risk? In the civilian healthcare space, there's real dollars going out every single day. And there's value to be demonstrated by going to AI and saying, from a clinical perspective, I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes last night, where Dr. Collins created some amazing breakthroughs, but that's a process, it's time consuming, but the value is headline kind of stuff. And I don't know, do you see your situation in the same, could you characterize it as the same kind of headline creating efforts that can attract investment?
So if I could just jump in real quick. So I think part of the interesting story here is like there is over the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, there's been an extra emphasis on value being equatable to how much funding you're able to procure or get from a venture capital organization. I think VCs are great, and they've done a lot to kind of create the thriving entrepreneurial communities that we see. But I will say, kind of, you go back to the general's kind of early comment in the beginning about creating like something that uplifts the human society, I guess, right? If you did focus on how you enable that human uplift, I can guarantee that across the variety of government customers that you could get small trickle amounts that probably manifest in smaller contracts, but you find that there's actually a more cohesive solution across a multitude of customers. It just requires the work to be kind of tangibly valued differently than you do off like a funding stream. And I think the venture capital funding stream that's sometimes less tied to that outcome ends up kind of blurring that story a little bit. So I would kind of challenge you guys as entrepreneurs to kind of think about that ultimate outcome versus the funding, right?
But so I'll just do 20 seconds on this because I know we have other questions we want to get to. But this is really important, and it was what I meant when I first talked about you have to have a vision for a marketplace in civil society, not just in the military, if you want this to be sustained. So I'll take my example. Pilot Training Next is really about learning next, but I chose pilots because it's not just an Air Force problem, it's a national problem. It's not just a national problem, it's an international problem. As air travel is becoming an international phenomenon beyond which we've ever seen before, the need for pilots is crushing the old-fashioned way of it takes a year, it's really expensive, and we know we can build them faster, better, cheaper, and smarter. So all the companies, the vision that we can fundamentally transform the way we teach people to be pilots for all of humanity is the exciting vision that brings in the big money. And that's happening behind the scenes. You just don't see it, but it's happening.
So number one is I think you guys do need to protect her.
Oh, yeah.
She's important. Number two is you said cultural willingness to take risk.
Yes.
And that's when I decided to stand up,
Good for you.
because I see this cultural willingness to take risk from the high level, from our bureaucracy, from the military. I think that is, there's not a better example than within Capital Factory in Austin, Texas. I've been here a long time, and so I've seen a lot of this city evolve. I've seen the technology industry evolve. I'm not in the technology industry, in the business world.
Right.
But what I want to do is challenge everybody in this room right now that's listening. If there's anybody out here that's reluctant at all to give up a hard question, now's the time. These people are here. They're asking for you to share your thoughts or your concerns or your reluctance. And so I just want to challenge everybody to take a step forward and listen to what they're asking for, because this is important. It's important for our kids and their kids and their kids, is the way I see the rubber meeting the road. So thank you all for being here. If you're reluctant, stand up. Now's a good time.
And I'll state to anyone, I mean, we need your help. I mean, where we're going is new ground. I don't want to call myself the first AI general, but we haven't had, you understand, a good label. we don't know what our AI forces look like, right? We've been given the opportunity to do direct commission of officers by the White House's new national strategy on AI straight into the military now. Okay? I don't think any of the services have thought about where would we do that and what field would we do that in, because no one has thought about what do our AI workers look like in the DoD.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming here. I am an entrepreneur based in Houston, and my company, Odyssey Arms, has actually created an edge computer that allows AI inference and data collection to be able to run on the actual weapon of our infantry soldiers. Currently, I've been working with Serious Simulations in the Army Research Lab in Orlando, Florida, but they operate at the speed of frozen molasses. So who would be the entry point that my company can actually go into and work with outside of like military contractors that are currently working with me,
Sure.
like General Dynamics and Cole, where I can get my technology in front of you guys at a speed that actually makes sense for a startup company like mine?
Sure. So and that's exactly why we are here.
Okay.
I mean, both in Austin and in the Capital Factory with our Army Application Lab, which is on this side of this floor.
All right.
But and that's why we're in this building and we're here to try to help make connections. And it's that easy just to start talking to people here and start showing us ideas and try to innovate with us. So.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to come see our demonstration right down here by
Okay, so this is a hard question, and I don't think the panel will have an answer, but I'm going to ask it because it's vitally important to our nation. We don't have sufficient economic resources at the cost of our engineers compared to, I'm going to call them our competitors, the Russians and the Chinese, let's say that we were trying to achieve artificial general intelligence, and let's just say that AGI trumps everything, because with it you could build physics that we don't even know about, and then you could dominate the world if you should choose to do so. Our competitor nations have no ethical issues with not doing that. And it's not that we don't have it, but their engineers might cost $10,000 a year. Ours might cost $250 because all these people in the room, they charge margin, and the engineers here all make just their regular salaries, 3 times as much. And they also, specifically China, but even Russia, because they don't pay their average person that much, they don't, they're using all that oil. Maybe they're building AI and hypersonic missiles. And so how are we going to compete with them long term when we've got a finite economy that we can't bankrupt, especially when our cost is, I'm going to say in general, about 5x their cost?
Well, I'll set Wendy up here for a good follow-up for this, but we have companies in the United States and technology where we're using AI to do AI. So part of it is we're trying to make the process easier to do AI, where you don't have to be a highly trained engineer to go into a field, and we can start having the systems actually train themselves to do a lot of this work. And this is how we had to start doing some of that design work now to enable that.
I actually can't think of a better answer. I mean, one of the things that we happen to do at Spark Cognition is exactly that. You nailed it, though. I mean, the supply of data scientists, or the demand for data scientists in this particular kind of exquisite, complicated, experted person far exceeds the supply globally. And then there's the money issue as well. So the using technology to replace technology, that's one thing that we are very focused on. I would just say secondly, that I'd be really interested in hearing the two of you speak a little bit to recruitment efforts even within the services and DoD. But one of the other things, is it Michael?
Yeah, it's Michael.
One of the other things, Michael, that we do as a company, and this may not sound like a super exciting answer, but it's a good one, is we partner with a lot of universities of folks who have deep knowledge in and even just starting out in fields that you're saying haven't even yet been discovered, in consortia with the services, or sometimes creating our own research think tank-ish kind of thing, which Spark Cognition has done with UT Austin and other groups. So, I mean, those are two answers to the question, but I would throw it over to the two of you.
There's another component to this that I would, as a historian, and I study history and I study innovation in cultures and what makes it pop here and not there. Why does it pop at this point in history versus that point? And I will tell you there are certain common themes there. And this anxiety that your question is the line, that they have billions of people, 1.4 billion people, and they have more money, they can focus on this than we will ever have. That does worry everybody, but it is historically not sufficient, and it never has been. It's not about the money or the people, it is about the thinking. Now, you could make the cause and effect relationship that if you have enough geniuses that they have, eventually you're going to just outbeat us. And money does matter to a certain degree. But throughout the history of mankind, when innovations are disruptive, it is unique, novel, and useful things that can disrupt even a large number of people and a lot of money. And here's an example, and then the test case. Let me start with the culture. Americans look at this and we freak out that China has so much money and so many people and there's no way. Okay, I get that. But what we do not see is I was lucky enough to grow up in a different culture. So I grew up in a tribal society with no Western influence. And I came to America at the age of 10, and I got to see this magnificent genius thing called the American way, which is extraordinary. And what other cultures will look at and see is America is the most creative culture in the history of mankind. And it's because our value of respect, that we respect other people. And that has always been the game changer throughout history. A small country like Spain or Portugal or England dominates the global economy. Why? Not because they're big, not because they have more people, because they had the right idea about transportation on the open oceans. Ideas are more powerful than a massive number of people. And I will tell you, the Chinese culture, and I'm a student of their culture, it is a subordinated culture that does not value human life like we do. And that will forever anchor them on solutions that are less creative than America. So history will tell you, creativity will beat numbers every day over time. In the short run, we could get in trouble, but in the long run, we historically are on the right side of history.
I'm worried about the long run. And I'm worried that if we hold back and hope that our creativity is innately better than another country, that we might lose. And I don't want to live under their society's system.
I agree.
And so that's what scares me, and that's
so
why.
We're on the same point on that. We want to be aggressive here because I don't want to take any risks. Because AGI is, like you pointed out, we don't even know what that could do.
So I'll add one more comment to that though. I think that to your training next concept, I think there's also the same issue and opportunity related to our kind of forgotten rural environments in the U.S. and what we see in these like large urban environments where we see the technology and the creativity and the entrepreneurship that's thriving, right? So if we figure out how to bridge that gap and look at AI as something that we can bring to more of those, commonly functioning parts of our ecosystem, and we look at like how do I change that creation and consumption world when it comes to AI so that I can actually extend it beyond these urban metro centers, then we actually have a better position on how we stay viable in that global threat as well, right? Because we have the same thing in microcosms in the US, and it's going to be critical to how we sustain.
But in the end, your question is right. There's no good answer. We have to be aggressive, and we have to be prepared for the unexpected, not the expected, and hope is not a strategy. Thank you.
It's not on, or is it on?
It's on.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my last question too. So.
Yeah, my question is, what do you think is the most important question I should ask myself if I'm a startup and I want to develop artificial intelligence for the Department of Defense?
I mean, that's amazing. My God, don't you come hang out with me every day and we'll live out that answer. I would say right now, I mean, number one, thank you so much for that. What a great question. There are a lot of answers to that I would have with you and for you being engaged in exactly in the living out of that right now. I think the one thing that I would say right now would be how to develop the relationship, how to find one thing maybe now that you do really, really, really well by looking into some of the pain points of folks in the department, whether it's a maintenance issue or whether it's a computer vision application, and really figuring out how to go to market with that one application that nobody else has yet cornered in the AI market. Part of the issue is with DoD is so complicated, but you got to have the right folks at multiple levels. You have to have top cover relationships, as General Quast has so well said. You've got to have somebody in the midst of that hierarchy who has a willingness to experiment. You've got to be willing to build something with them, to show them, and you're going to likely have to invest your own money for some period of time to do that. Otherwise, you're stuck in the 50K world, which we have been for some period of time, and we're just now starting to get beyond that. Where I think so many companies in this space have problems, Nick, is in the Valley of Death place. We have POC'd our way to death through the Department of Defense right now. We've got great partners. We've worked with the Air Force, worked with the Navy. We're doing some interesting stuff on the predictive maintenance side now with the Army and the United States Forces Korea. There's a lot of cool things actually that's going on. What is impossible for me to even figure out right now is not how to get stuck in that valley of death between a proof of concept that has demonstrated relevance from a deployment perspective and being able to deploy. And that's not all in my control. It's a lot about how you work that relationship. You've got to show a return on investment. You probably won't have the customer doing that for you. So there's a lot of work up front. It's cost, it's time, it's, while you're trying then to maybe work through a Series C or a Series B or whatever, it's a lot to try to figure out. But I think that, focusing in on what do we do better than anybody else right now in the market and going after the targeted folks that allows you to carve out that niche and own it, and then figure out from a proof of concept perspective where are those leverage points where we can try to get a deployment, and then ultimately, leading to, one would hope, even a program of record or something, a line item in a 5-year defense budget. Which, if you ever do that, I'm going to come work for you.
I'd also say, don't get stuck on how you think about the problem and your particular solution, right? So try to challenge yourself to think about the problem in 10 different ways and come up with 10 different AI approaches to it, because half of the struggle here is that people get married to how they're describing the solution and trying to find 10 customers that they have to approach to try to sell that solution to, and nobody really knows how to characterize the problem well enough, so challenge yourself on how you think about it.
Yeah, that's a great point. We are really not very good at defining the problem, agnostic of a solution. And this goes back to something Wendy said, we don't know what we don't know. You can help us more than you think. And for Pilot Training Next, for example, that is going to be a line item. Our Secretary of the Air Force that you see on these pictures here, she came and saw what we were doing, and she said, scale it. So it will be a Palm line item. And those companies that joined us and were willing to take that risk are going to be rich. So, because it's so powerful. Think about the business case. If I can cut the cost in half and the time in half to produce pilots in the Air Force, that is marketable to the airlines across the globe. Holy cow.
Thanks, guys.
I work for